In downtown Philadelphia, a janitor's desperate attempt to save a dying billionaire CEO looked like something it wasn't, and within 24 hours, the man who gave her breath back became the villain no one wanted to defend. What happens when doing the right thing costs you everything? Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this journey travels. This is a story about truth, injustice, and one ordinary man who refused to disappear. The conference room on the 43rd floor of Langford Industries was the kind of place where fortunes were made with a handshake and destroyed with a signature. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Philadelphia skyline like a painting of power itself. The mahogany table could seat 20, but today it held only 12. 12 of the most influential executives in the Northeast Corridor, each one dressed in suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At the head of that table stood Victoria Langford. 52 years old, self-made, ruthless when necessary, brilliant always. Her reputation preceded her into every room she entered. A woman who'd built a pharmaceutical empire from a single patent and 3 maxed-out credit cards 20 years ago. Now, Langford Industries employed over 15,000 people across 4 states. She didn't just run the company, she was the company. And right now, she was dying. It started so subtly that no one noticed at first. Victoria was mid-sentence, discussing projected Q4 earnings, her laser pointer tracing an upward trend on the presentation screen, when her words began to slur. Just slightly. A stumble over syllables that could have been fatigue or a dry throat. Her chief financial officer, Gregory Marks, glanced up from his tablet with mild concern, but said nothing. Victoria Langford didn't appreciate interruptions, even well-meaning ones. As you can see, she continued, her voice slightly hoarse now, our acquisition of medtech solutions will position us to dominate the cardiac device market by... Her hand wavered. The laser pointer's red dot jerked across the screen erratically, like a damaged compass searching for north. Several executives shifted in their seats, discomfort rippling through the room's perfect veneer of professionalism. Victoria? Marks ventured carefully. Perhaps we should take a brief... She didn't hear him. Couldn't hear him. Because Victoria Langford's world had suddenly narrowed to a pinpoint of consciousness, her vision tunneling, her chest tightening like a vice. The presentation clicker slipped from her fingers and clattered against the polished floor. Her other hand grasped at the table's edge, knuckles white, fighting against gravity and the betrayal of her own body. "Ms. Langford!" someone shouted. That's when her legs gave out. Victoria collapsed like a marionette with cut strings, sudden, complete, terrifying. Her head struck the edge of the table on the way down, a sickening crack that made everyone in the room flinch. She crumpled onto the imported Italian carpet, her body twitching once before going completely still. For 3 eternal seconds, nobody moved. 12 brilliant minds, collectively responsible for billions in annual revenue, froze, paralyzed not by inability but by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Victoria Langford didn't collapse. Victoria Langford didn't show weakness. Victoria Langford controlled every room she entered with the force of her will alone. And yet there she lay, motionless, her face already turning an alarming shade of gray. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Call 911," Gregory Marks finally shouted, fumbling for his phone with shaking hands. Someone called. "Jesus Christ, is she breathing?" "I don't know, I can't tell." "Don't just stand there, do something." "Do what? I'm not a doctor." "Check her pulse, check if she's..." "You check her pulse!" The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, panic rising like floodwater. Executives backed away from Victoria's body as if proximity itself was dangerous, as if whatever had struck her down might be contagious. 3 people had their phones out now, some calling 911, others filming, already thinking about liability, about optics, about how this would play on the evening news. Nobody touched her. Nobody helped her. Nobody except the man who wasn't supposed to be there at all. Daniel Harper had been cleaning the 42nd floor when he heard the shouting. At 34 years old, Daniel had the kind of invisible presence that came with years of working jobs where being noticed usually meant being blamed. Night shift janitor at Langford Industries for the past 14 months. Quiet, punctual. The type of employee whose name most people never learned, despite seeing his face 5 nights a week. He'd been emptying trash bins in the executive break room, radio earbuds playing soft jazz to make the hours pass easier, when the commotion from upstairs filtered through the ceiling. Raised voices. Something was wrong. Daniel pulled out his earbuds, listening. More shouting. A crash. His supervisor's voice echoed in his memory. "Mind your business, Harper. Executive floors are off limits unless specifically requested. Do your job. Stay invisible. Cash your check." Daniel hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then he abandoned his cleaning cart and ran for the stairwell. His work boots pounded against concrete steps, taking them 2 at a time, his breath already coming hard. He wasn't young anymore, and too many skipped meals had left him leaner than he should be, his frame carrying a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. But something in those voices upstairs had triggered an instinct he couldn't ignore. Someone needed help. Daniel burst through the stairwell door onto the 43rd floor and immediately knew he'd made a terrible mistake. The scene before him was wrong in every possible way. Executive types, people whose shoes cost more than his monthly rent, were clustered around something on the floor, their faces twisted in panic and revulsion. The air itself felt electric with crisis, thick with the kind of fear that came when control slipped away from people used to having it. A woman's body lay on the carpet. "Ambulance is coming," they said. 12 minutes. 12 minutes? She could be dead in 12 minutes. "Does anyone know CPR? Anyone?" Daniel's eyes locked on the woman's face. Even from the doorway, he could see she wasn't breathing. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint. Her chest was completely still. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people. He was the janitor, invisible, irrelevant, someone who existed in the margins of their reality. If he walked back through that stairwell door right now, no one would even notice he'd been here. But she was dying. Daniel pushed through the frozen executives, his voice cutting through the panic. "Move. Everyone move back." "Who the hell are you?" someone demanded. Daniel didn't answer. He dropped to his knees beside Victoria Langford, his hands already moving with a precision that surprised even himself. Tilt the head back. Check for breathing. Check for pulse. Nothing. No rise and fall of her chest. No flutter of heartbeat against his fingertips pressed to her carotid artery. "Sir, you can't just—" "She's not breathing," Daniel said flatly, cutting off whatever objection was coming. "No pulse. She needs CPR now or she dies. Are any of you trained?" Silence. Guilty, shameful silence. "I am," Daniel said. "So either help me or get out of my way." He tilted Victoria's head back further, opening her airway, his mind racing through the training he'd received years ago during his brief stint as an EMT volunteer. It had been almost a decade, but the movements came back like muscle memory written into his bones. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Repeat. Daniel positioned his hands on Victoria's sternum, lacing his fingers together, and began compressions, hard, fast, deep enough to potentially crack ribs, which was exactly what the training demanded. Her body jolted with each thrust, her expensive silk blouse wrinkling under the pressure of his palms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Is this legal?" someone whispered. "Can he just—" "Shut up, Gregory," another voice snapped. 28, 29, 30. Daniel tilted Victoria's head back again, pinched her nose shut, and sealed his mouth over hers. That's when everything changed. He breathed air into her lungs, once, twice, forcing oxygen into her unresponsive body. To anyone watching, especially from certain angles, it looked like something else entirely. It looked intimate, inappropriate, wrong. "Oh my God," someone gasped. He's doing CPR, you idiot. It looks like what else is he supposed to do? Let her die?" Daniel didn't hear any of it. His entire world had narrowed to the woman beneath his hands. 30 more compressions, her chest rising and falling under the force of his efforts. 2 more breaths, his lips on hers, breath transferring between their bodies, sustaining her, keeping her on this side of death. Again and again. His arms began to burn. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto her face. Somewhere in the background, people were arguing, phones were ringing, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was the rhythm. 30 and 2. 30 and 2. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't let her go. "Come on," Daniel muttered between breaths. Come on, breathe, breathe, damn it. Nothing. Her body remained limp, unresponsive. How long until the ambulance? Someone shouted. 7 minutes. 7 minutes might as well be 7 hours. Daniel's muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant death, and he'd already seen too much death in his life. His wife Sarah, taken by cancer 3 years ago, dying in a hospital bed while machines beeped their meaningless reassurances. He'd been helpless then, watching her slip away despite every prayer and plea. Not this time. Not if he could help it. 30, Daniel gasped, and sealed his mouth over Victoria's again. That's when her body convulsed. She coughed, a violent, rattling sound that seemed to tear itself from somewhere deep inside her chest. Her back arched. Her eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. Daniel rolled her onto her side just as she vomited, her body purging itself, fighting its way back to life. The room erupted in shocked exclamations, but Daniel barely heard them. He was too focused on Victoria's face, watching color slowly return to her lips, watching her chest begin to rise and fall on its own, watching the gray pallor fade as oxygen flooded back into her system. "You're okay," he said quietly, his hand steady on her shoulder. "You're breathing. You're going to be okay." Victoria's unfocused eyes found his face. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak croak. "Don't talk," Daniel told her gently. "Paramedics are coming. Just breathe. Just keep breathing." For one brief, crystalline moment, gratitude flickered in Victoria Langford's eyes. A recognition of debt, of life given back, of salvation pulled from the jaws of death. Then the executives closed in, and everything went to hell. "Get away from her!" Gregory Marks shoved Daniel aside, his face flushed with belated authority. "Security! Where the hell is security?" "I was just—" Daniel started. "You put your hands on her, your mouth on her." "I was performing CPR. She wasn't breathing. That's for the authorities to determine." Another executive, a woman in a pearl necklace that probably cost more than Daniel's car, pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police. Everyone saw what he did." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What I did? I saved her life." "You touched Miss Langford without consent," Marks hissed, his eyes cold. "Do you have any idea the liability, the implications? She was dying. That's not your determination to make." The accusations came faster now, voices overlapping, reality being rewritten in real time. Daniel looked around desperately, searching for any face that showed understanding, any voice that would speak up for truth. But the executives had already closed ranks, their narrative solidifying with the speed of self-preservation. Heavy footsteps announced the arrival of building security, 2 officers in ill-fitting uniforms who looked confused by the scene before them. "This man," Marks pointed at Daniel, his voice dripping with authority, "assaulted Ms. Langford. Restrain him until police arrive." "I didn't assault anyone!" Daniel's voice rose, panic creeping in. "Check the security cameras. They'll show—" "You're the night janitor," one of the security guards said, recognition dawning on his face. Not friendly recognition, the kind that came with predetermined conclusions about who belonged and who didn't. "You're not supposed to be on this floor. I heard shouting. Someone needed help. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us." The guard's hand moved to Daniel's arm, gripping firmly. Not quite rough, but unmistakably restraint. "You can't be serious," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "She wasn't breathing. I gave her CPR. That's all I did. That's all I did." Nobody met his eyes. The sound of sirens finally reached the 43rd floor, growing louder. Paramedics would be here soon. They would check Victoria, would see she was alive, would ask what happened. Surely they would understand. Surely someone would tell the truth. But as Daniel was led away, as Victoria Langford was surrounded by her people who had done nothing to save her, he saw the way the story was already being shaped. The way hands waved dismissively in his direction. The way voices lowered to whispers. The way phones tilted to capture footage that would be edited, contextualized, reframed. He'd saved her life. And he was about to pay for it. The security office was a windowless room in the building's basement, all concrete and fluorescent lighting. They didn't handcuff Daniel, but they didn't need to. 2 guards stood by the door while a third, apparently the supervisor, sat across a metal table from him. "Statement," the supervisor said, clicking a pen. "What were you doing on the 43rd floor?" Daniel's hands trembled in his lap. I heard shouting, commotion. Someone sounded like they were in trouble. So you abandoned your post? I went to help. Help. The supervisor's tone made it sound like a foreign concept. And what exactly did you do when you reached the executive conference room? A woman was on the floor, not breathing. No pulse. I performed CPR. You put your mouth on Ms. Langford. The way he said it, flat, accusatory, made Daniel's skin crawl. That's how rescue breathing works. It's part of CPR. Are you certified? I was, years ago. EMT volunteer training. Current certification? No, but so you performed a medical procedure you're not currently certified to perform on a person who couldn't consent in a situation where you had no authority to intervene. The supervisor wasn't asking questions anymore. He was building a case. She was dying, Daniel said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. In another minute, maybe less, she would have suffered brain damage or death. Basic first aid doesn't require certification when someone's life is at risk. That's Good Samaritan law. Good Samaritan law protects from liability, not from criminal investigation. The supervisor leaned back. Multiple witnesses reported that your actions appeared inappropriate. Appeared. They appeared inappropriate because people don't understand what CPR looks like. Daniel's control slipped. I was saving her life. Check the security footage. It'll show everything. Security footage is being reviewed by our legal team. Your legal team? Daniel laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. Not the police. Not an objective party. Langford Industries has protocols for incidents involving executive personnel. Protocols. Daniel buried his face in his hands, the weight of it all crashing down. He could see where this was going, could see the machine already in motion, grinding toward a predetermined conclusion. I have a daughter. I need this job. Please, just look at the footage. It'll show the truth. The supervisor's expression didn't change. You're suspended pending investigation, effective immediately. Security badge and building access revoked. You'll be contacted. Suspended? I saved her life. You overstepped your position and made physical contact with the executive without authorization. Now! The supervisor stood. Collect your personal items from your locker. You have 10 minutes before you're escorted from the premises. Daniel wanted to argue, to fight, to make them see reason. But he'd grown up poor, had worked enough low-wage jobs to know how this worked. People like him didn't win arguments with people like them. Truth didn't matter when power had already decided the narrative. He collected his things in silence. A spare uniform shirt. A photo of Lily, his daughter, taped inside his locker. A paperback novel he'd been reading during breaks. 13 months of work, of showing up on time, of doing his job without complaint. Erased in a single evening. As security walked him out through the basement exit, not the main lobby, never where important people might see, Daniel caught a glimpse of the ambulance parked out front. Paramedics were loading Victoria Langford onto a stretcher. She was conscious, speaking to them, very much alive. Because of him. The cold Philadelphia night hit him like a slap. November wind cut through his thin jacket as Daniel stood on the sidewalk, watching his former workplace tower above him, all glass and steel and money. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched Lily during his shifts. Everything okay? You're home early. Daniel stared at the message, trying to figure out how to answer. How to explain that he'd done the right thing and been punished for it. How to tell his 7-year-old daughter that daddy lost his job, and with it their health insurance, their stability, their already precarious grip on survival. He typed back, "On my way. Thank you." The walk to the subway felt longer than usual. Each step carried the weight of consequences he couldn't yet fully comprehend. But as Daniel descended into the fluorescent tunnel of the station, as he fed his transit card into the turnstile and waited on the platform for the train that would carry him back to his real life, one thought kept circling through his mind. She was alive because of him. And somehow, that was going to have to be enough. Because everything else, his job, his reputation, his future, was already being taken away. The train arrived with a mechanical screech. Daniel stepped aboard, found a seat in the nearly empty car, and let his head fall back against the scratched plastic window. Somewhere in this city, Victoria Langford was being rushed to a hospital, surrounded by the best medical care money could buy. She would recover. She would return to her empire. She would probably never think about the janitor who'd saved her life again. That's how the world worked. Daniel knew that, but knowing it didn't make it hurt any less. The apartment Daniel came home to was the kind of place that apologized for existing. Fourth floor of a 6-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had been up and coming for the past 20 years and somehow never quite arrived. The building's elevator had been broken since August. The radiator clanked and hissed, but never quite produced enough heat. The water pressure was a suggestion rather than a certainty. But it was home. His and Lily's. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, her weathered face creasing with concern the moment she saw his expression. "Daniel, what happened?" "Long story," he managed. "How was she?" "Lily's fine. Homework done, dinner eaten, teeth brushed. She's in bed reading." Mrs. Chen studied him with the practiced eye of someone who'd survived enough hardship to recognize it in others. "You look terrible." "I feel worse." Daniel pulled out his wallet, counting out the bills he paid her each week. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Really." She took the money, but didn't move toward the door. "If you need to talk—" "I need to sleep," Daniel said, which wasn't untrue. "Thank you, though." After she left, Daniel stood in his tiny living room for a long moment, just breathing. The space was sparse, secondhand furniture, bare walls, everything functional rather than decorative. But it was clean, always clean. That was something he could still control. "Daddy?" Lily's voice, small and sleepy, came from the bedroom. Daniel forced his face into something resembling okay and pushed open her door. His daughter sat up in bed, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, brown eyes huge in her small face. 7 years old, all knees and elbows and wild curly hair that never quite cooperated with any brush. She looked like her mother. "Hey, sweetheart," Daniel said softly. "What are you still doing up?" "Waiting for you." Lily scooted over, making room on her small bed. "You're home early. Did something happen?" Daniel sat down carefully, the cheap mattress springs creaking under his weight. How much truth did a 7-year-old need? How much could she handle? "Kind of," he admitted. "Someone got sick at work. I helped them." "That's good, right?" "Yeah, that's good." Lily studied his face with the uncomfortable perceptiveness of children who'd learned young to read their parents' moods for signs of incoming storms. "You look sad, though." "Just tired, baby. It was a long day." She didn't believe him. Daniel could see it in her eyes, but she was kind enough not to push. Instead, she held up her book. "Mrs. Chen said I could read one more chapter before lights out." "Then you better get reading." Daniel kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Love you, Lily Bean." "Love you more, Daddy." He left her door cracked, light from the hallway spilling across her floor, and made his way to the kitchen. The refrigerator's contents were depressing even on good days. Now they felt like a countdown timer to disaster. Milk that would last another 3 days. Eggs, pasta, peanut butter. Enough food for maybe a week if he stretched it. The bills were worse. Daniel pulled the stack from the drawer where he kept them, spreading them across the cramped kitchen table like tarot cards forecasting an unpleasant future. Rent, due in 12 days. Electric, water, internet, which he couldn't justify cutting because Lily needed it for school. His phone bill. The payment plan for the emergency room visit 6 months ago when Lily had gotten pneumonia. The math wasn't complicated. Without his Langford Industries paycheck, he had maybe 3 weeks before the whole fragile structure collapsed. His savings, what little existed, would cover 2 weeks of expenses, maximum. After that, Daniel pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes until colors bloomed in the darkness. He couldn't think about after that right now. First thing tomorrow, he'd start looking for new work. Anything. Restaurants, retail, security, whatever would hire him fast. His resume wasn't impressive, but he was reliable, clean, had never been fired before. Except now he had been fired. No, suspended pending investigation, which somehow sounded worse. His phone buzzed against the table, making him jump. Unknown number. Daniel stared at it for a moment before answering. Hello? Daniel Harper? Professional voice. Female. Curt. Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Langford Industries Human Resources. I'm calling to inform you that effective immediately, your employment with Langford Industries has been terminated. The words hit like physical blows, even though he'd been expecting them. Terminated? I was told suspended. After review of the incident, we've determined that your actions constituted a violation of company policy regarding appropriate conduct with executive personnel. I saved her life. Daniel's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. She wasn't breathing. I performed CPR. Your interpretation of events has been noted. However, multiple witnesses reported behavior that made them uncomfortable. Company policy is clear about physical contact. She was dying. Mr. Harper, becoming hostile won't change the decision. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your address on file. Any questions regarding insurance coverage or insurance? Ice flooded Daniel's veins. What about insurance? Cobra continuation is available for purchase if I can't afford Cobra. I have a daughter. She needs... That's not the company's responsibility, Mr. Harper. Is there anything else? The professional detachment in her voice, the complete absence of humanity, the way she spoke about his family's health care, like it was an inconvenient detail. It crystallized something in Daniel's gut, rage, pure and helpless. You know what happened, he said, his voice shaking. You've seen the security footage by now. You know I saved her. Mr. Harper. And you're firing me anyway. Silence. Then, the decision is final. Have a good evening. The line went dead. Daniel sat staring at his phone for a long time, watching the screen dim, then fade to black. Somewhere in a luxury hospital, Victoria Langford was alive. Her heart was beating, her lungs were drawing breath, all because he'd ignored every instinct to stay invisible, to mind his business, to protect himself. And this was his reward. The next morning's news would make everything so much worse, but Daniel didn't know that yet. As he finally dragged himself to bed, as he lay staring at the ceiling in his cramped bedroom, listening to the building's night sounds, all he knew was the hollow ache of injustice. He'd done the right thing, and he'd lost everything anyway. Outside, Philadelphia slept, indifferent to the small tragedy unfolding in one of its forgotten corners. The city didn't care about night janitors or their sick daughters or the impossible math of surviving on nothing, but it cared very much about stories. And by morning, Daniel Harper's story, twisted, weaponized, and completely divorced from truth, would be everywhere. He just didn't know it yet. Daniel woke to the sound of his phone vibrating against the nightstand, a persistent buzz that dragged him from uneasy sleep into the gray pre-dawn light filtering through his thin curtains. He'd managed maybe 3 hours of rest, his dreams a confused tangle of CPR compressions, and Victoria Langford's gray face and the cold voice of the HR representative telling him his daughter's insurance was gone. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He grabbed it, squinting at the screen. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages. His phone had been on silent, and apparently the entire world had been trying to reach him while he slept. The first message he opened was from Tommy Rodriguez, another janitor at Langford Industries who Daniel sometimes grabbed coffee with during shift changes. Bro, you need to see this. Check Channel 6. I'm so sorry, man. Daniel's stomach dropped. With shaking hands, he pulled up the news app on his phone. The headline hit him like a sledgehammer. Langford Industries CEO allegedly assaulted during medical emergency. Janitor under investigation. The article was worse. So much worse. Victoria Langford, CEO of Langford Industries, was allegedly assaulted yesterday evening during a medical emergency at the company's downtown Philadelphia headquarters. Sources close to the investigation report that Daniel Harper, 34, a night shift custodial worker, made inappropriate physical contact with Ms. Langford while she was incapacitated. Multiple witnesses reported feeling uncomfortable with Harper's actions. Langford Industries has terminated Harper's employment and is cooperating fully with authorities. Ms. Langford is recovering at an undisclosed medical facility and is expected to make a full recovery. They didn't say CPR. They didn't say life-saving. They didn't say that 12 executives had stood frozen while she died. Just inappropriate physical contact and incapacitated and uncomfortable words carefully chosen to paint a picture that had nothing to do with truth. Daniel's hand shook so hard he nearly dropped the phone. He scrolled down to the comments section, a mistake he'd regret for days. Disgusting. Fire him and press charges. Rich people's lives matter more than your job, buddy. Should have let the professionals handle it. Another creep taking advantage of a helpless woman? Throw the book at him. I bet this isn't the first time. They need to investigate his history. One comment, buried among hundreds. Does anyone actually know what happened? This article is pretty vague. The response, why are you defending a predator? Daniel dropped the phone on the bed and stumbled to the bathroom, making it to the toilet just in time to vomit. His body heaved, purging nothing but bile and fear, while his mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just local news. This was his name, his face, attached to words like assault and inappropriate and investigation. This would follow him forever. This would destroy any chance of finding new work. This would... Daddy? Lily stood in the bathroom doorway, her rabbit dangling from one hand, her face creased with worry. Are you sick? Daniel wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, flushed the toilet, and tried to arrange his face into something that wouldn't terrify his daughter. Little bit, sweetheart. Must have been something I ate. Do you need medicine? I'll be okay. He stood on unsteady legs, rinsed his mouth at the sink. In the mirror, he looked like a stranger. Hollow-eyed, gray-faced, older than his 34 years. Why don't you go pick out your clothes for school? I'll make breakfast in a minute. Lily didn't move. She was studying him with that too-old expression, that wariness that came from losing her mother and learning young that adults couldn't always protect you from the bad things. You're scared, she said quietly. Daniel's throat closed. I'm okay, baby. You look like you did when Mommy was sick, when you tried to smile but couldn't really. He knelt down, pulling her into a hug that probably held on too tight. She smelled like sleep and strawberry shampoo and innocence, and Daniel wanted desperately to shield her from what was coming. But the world had other plans. Something happened at work, he said carefully. Something that got misunderstood. But I promise you I didn't do anything wrong, okay? Lily pulled back, searching his face. What kind of misunderstood? The complicated kind. Daniel smoothed her wild curls. But we're going to be fine. Now go get dressed. I'll make pancakes. They didn't have ingredients for pancakes, but Lily didn't need to know that yet. She padded back to her room and Daniel leaned against the bathroom sink, trying to breathe, trying to think. His phone started ringing again. Another unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, then another, and another. The vultures were circling, probably reporters looking for a statement, for him to say something they could twist into more headlines. Daniel silenced his phone completely and went to the kitchen. No pancake mix, but there were eggs and the last 2 slices of bread. French toast. He could make that work. Keep his hands busy, focus on the small things. Get Lily fed, get her to school, then figure out what the hell to do next. The eggs were sizzling in the pan when someone knocked on the apartment door. Hard. Aggressive. The kind of knock that demanded rather than requested. Daniel's whole body went tense. Through the peephole, he saw 2 men in suits, not police. Their bearing was wrong. Reporters, maybe, or lawyers. He didn't open the door. Daniel Harper, one of them called through the wood. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the incident at Langford Industries. Daniel stayed silent, barely breathing. Mr. Harper, we know you're in there. We just want your side of the story. No, they didn't. They wanted footage of him looking guilty. Words they could cut and paste into whatever narrative they'd already built. Daniel had seen enough news to know how this worked. I'm calling the police if you don't leave, he said loudly. You're harassing me at my home. A pause. Then, the public has a right to know what happened. The public can read the police report when there is one. Leave, now. Their footsteps retreated, but Daniel knew they'd be back. Or others would. He was a story now, and stories needed feeding. Lily emerged from her room dressed for school, her backpack already on. Who was at the door? Wrong address, Daniel lied, plating her French toast with hands that had almost stopped shaking. Eat up, kiddo. Don't want to be late. The walk to Lily's elementary school was normally Daniel's favorite part of the morning routine. 7 blocks through their neighborhood, Lily chattering about her friends or her latest book, or the picture she was drawing in art class. Just the two of them against the world, same as it had been since Sarah died. Today, every person they passed felt like a threat. The woman at the corner bodega who usually smiled and waved, did she look at Daniel differently this morning? The businessman waiting at the crosswalk, was that recognition in his eyes? The young mother with a stroller, did she pull her child a little closer as they passed? Daniel told himself he was being paranoid. The news story probably hadn't penetrated this deep into people's morning routines yet. Most folks had bigger problems than some janitor they'd never met, but paranoia and reality were starting to blur. At the school gates, Daniel knelt down to Lily's level like he did every morning. Have a good day, okay? Listen to Miss Peterson. Be kind to your friends. I always am, Lily said, rolling her eyes with the exasperation of 7-year-olds everywhere. Then, softer. Will you be okay, Daddy? I'll be fine, sweetheart. I promise. Another lie. They were stacking up. Lily hugged him tight, then ran off to join her friends on the playground. Daniel watched her go, memorizing the moment, her purple backpack bouncing, her curls flying, her laugh carrying on the cold November air. Normal, innocent, untouched by the nightmare that was closing in around them. He needed to keep it that way. The walk back to the apartment took him past a newsstand. Daniel almost kept walking, but some self-destructive impulse made him stop. The Philadelphia Inquirer had picked up the story. Front page, below the fold. Questions raised about corporate safety after executive's medical emergency. The photograph showed Victoria Langford from some charity gala, radiant in an evening gown, every inch the powerful CEO. The smaller inset photo showed the Langford Industries building. No photo of Daniel. Not yet. But that would change once the reporters who'd knocked on his door this morning got their footage. You gonna buy that or just read it for free? Daniel startled. The newsstand operator, a grizzled man in his 60s, was watching him with an expression somewhere between amusement and annoyance. Sorry. Daniel pulled out his wallet, counted coins. How much? $2.50. Daniel bought the paper with money he couldn't afford to spend and carried it home like evidence of his own execution. In his apartment, he spread it across the kitchen table and forced himself to read every word. The article was more balanced than the online version, at least. It mentioned CPR. It quoted an anonymous source saying Daniel had responded to a medical emergency. But it also quoted Gregory Marks. While we appreciate that Mr. Harper may have been attempting to help, his actions raise serious concerns about appropriate boundaries and the safety of our executive team. We take these matters very seriously. Appropriate boundaries. Safety concerns. Words designed to plant doubt, to make people question what really happened in that conference room. Daniel's phone, still on silent but lighting up constantly, showed another voicemail. He almost deleted it unheard, but something made him check. Mr. Harper, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Philadelphia Police Department. I'm calling regarding an incident at Langford Industries. I'd appreciate it if you could come down to the station for a voluntary interview. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. She left a number. Her tone was professional, not aggressive, but Daniel knew better than to trust that. Voluntary interview meant they didn't have enough to arrest him yet, but they were building a case. And if he didn't go voluntarily, it would look like he had something to hide. He was trapped. Every direction led somewhere worse. Daniel called the number. Detective Chen answered on the second ring. Mr. Harper, thank you for calling back. Am I being charged with something? Direct question. No dancing around. Not at this time. We're gathering information about what happened. Multiple witnesses have given statements, but we'd like to hear your account. With a lawyer present? A pause. That's your right. Absolutely. Though I want to be clear, you're not a suspect in a criminal investigation at this time. This is standard procedure for any incident involving... I can't afford a lawyer, Daniel interrupted. Truth, blunt, and humiliating. So if I need one, we're going to have a problem. Another pause, longer this time. When Chen spoke again, her voice had softened slightly. Mr. Harper, I've reviewed the security footage from Langford Industries. All of it. I know what happened in that room. Daniel's heart lurched. Then you know I saved her life. I know you performed CPR on a woman who wasn't breathing. I also know that 12 people stood around doing nothing while you did it." Chen's tone carried something that might have been sympathy. "But here's the situation. Langford Industries is pushing hard on this. They have lawyers calling my captain every 3 hours. Corporate wants this handled quietly, which usually means making someone take the fall. And right now, that someone is you. So what? I'm just supposed to accept that? I'm saying you need to protect yourself. Come in, give your statement on record with everything documented. Tell the truth. I'll make sure it's part of the official file. That way, if this does go sideways, you have your version documented with the police, not just corporate." It was the most honest thing anyone in authority had said to him since this nightmare began. Daniel wanted to trust it, but trust had gotten him here in the first place. "When?" he asked. "Today, if possible. The sooner the better." "I have to pick up my daughter from school at 3. Come in at 1. We'll be done well before 3. I promise." Daniel agreed because he didn't have better options. After hanging up, he sat at his kitchen table surrounded by bills he couldn't pay and newspapers calling him a predator, and tried to figure out how his life had disintegrated so completely in less than 24 hours. The answer was simple, really. He'd forgotten the most important rule of survival when you're poor: don't get noticed, stay invisible, mind your business. The moment you step outside those lines, the moment you draw attention to yourself, the system that barely tolerates your existence will crush you for the presumption. He'd saved a woman's life, and the universe was punishing him for it. At 12:30, Daniel caught the subway downtown to the police station. The morning commute crowd had thinned, leaving the car populated mostly by students and elderly folks and people like him, those whose work schedules existed in the margins of normal business hours. Nobody paid him attention, which was a mercy. For now, he was still anonymous to strangers. That wouldn't last. The police station was exactly as depressing as Daniel remembered from the one time he'd had to file a report after his car got broken into 2 years ago. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the smell of burnt coffee and institutional disinfectant. He gave his name at the desk, and within 5 minutes, Detective Chen appeared. She was younger than her voice had suggested, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. "Mr. Harper, thank you for coming in. Follow me." The interview room was small, windowless, dominated by a metal table and 4 plastic chairs. A camera in the corner documented everything. Chen gestured for Daniel to sit. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine." Daniel folded his hands on the table, trying to project calm he absolutely did not feel. "Let's just get this done." Chen pulled out a notepad. "I'm going to record this conversation. For the record, you're here voluntarily and are free to leave at any time. Understood?" "Understood." She pressed a button on a small digital recorder. November 8th, 2024, 1:07 p.m. Interview with Daniel Harper regarding incident at Langford Industries. "Mr. Harper, in your own words, can you tell me what happened yesterday evening?" Daniel told her everything. The shouting he'd heard through the ceiling, running upstairs despite knowing he wasn't supposed to be on the executive floors. Finding Victoria Langford collapsed, not breathing, no pulse. The frozen executives doing nothing. His decision to start CPR, the compressions, the rescue breaths, the desperate minutes before she finally gasped back to life. Chen listened without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across the notepad. When Daniel finished, she was quiet for a moment. "And at any point," she said carefully, "did you touch Ms. Langford in any way that wasn't directly related to performing CPR?" "No, never." "The witnesses, some of them reported that the scene looked inappropriate. CPR looks like a lot of things to people who don't know what they're watching." Daniel's frustration bled through despite his efforts to stay calm. Rescue breathing requires mouth-to-mouth contact. Chest compressions are aggressive. "I was trying to restart her heart, not—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. "I know." Chen's voice was gentle. "I've seen the footage, Mr. Harper. It's clear you were performing CPR. It's also clear that you saved her life. She wasn't breathing for close to 3 minutes before you started compressions. Another minute or 2, and we'd be talking about brain damage or death." Relief crashed through Daniel so intensely he felt dizzy. "Then you'll tell them that. Tell Langford Industries. Tell the media. Tell everyone that I didn't. I'll include it in my report. Chen set down her pen. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't really a police matter. Miss Langford hasn't pressed charges. No crime was committed. What you're dealing with is a civil and employment issue. The company fired you, and they're controlling the narrative to protect themselves from liability. That's not something the police can fix. So what am I supposed to do? Get a lawyer. Sue for wrongful termination. Get the security footage entered as evidence in civil court. Fight back through the proper channels. I told you, I can't afford a lawyer. Chen leaned back, her expression troubled. There are legal aid organizations, pro bono attorneys who take cases like this. It's a long shot, but I need money now, Daniel interrupted. My daughter and we have maybe 3 weeks before we can't make rent. I don't have time for a long legal battle that might go nowhere. Then find new work as quickly as possible. Keep your head down. Let this blow over. With my name all over the news as someone who made inappropriate contact with a CEO? Daniel laughed bitterly. Who's going to hire me? Chen didn't have an answer for that, because they both knew there wasn't one. The interview concluded at 1:43 p.m. Chen walked him out, and at the station doors she stopped him with a hand on his arm. For what it's worth, she said quietly, you did the right thing. You saved her life. That matters, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. Does it? Daniel asked. Because from where I'm standing, doing the right thing costs me everything. He left before she could respond, stepping out into the cold Philadelphia afternoon. The city moved around him with relentless indifference, cars and buses and people all rushing somewhere important, none of them knowing or caring about the man whose life was falling apart in real time. Daniel had 2 hours before he needed to pick up Lily, 2 hours to figure out some kind of plan. He walked without direction, letting his feet carry him through streets he'd walked 1,000 times. Past the diner where he and Sarah used to get pancakes on Sunday mornings. Past the park where Lily learned to ride her bike. Past the library where he'd spent hours applying for better jobs that never materialized. His phone buzzed. Another call from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Harper? Unfamiliar voice. Male. Brisk. This is David Brennan from Channel 10 News. We'd like to offer you an opportunity to tell your side of the story. We could do an interview as early as... Daniel hung up without responding. They wanted a story, not truth. They wanted him to perform his humiliation for ratings. He'd already given Detective Chen his statement. That would have to be enough. But the calls kept coming. Different numbers, different stations, all wanting the same thing. By the time Daniel reached Lily's school, his voicemail was full and his patience was gone. He blocked every unknown number, knowing it was futile. They'd find new ways to reach him. Lily came running out at 3 o'clock exactly, her face bright despite the cold. Daddy, guess what? I got 100 on my spelling test. That's amazing, sweetheart. Daniel hugged her, grateful for this one clean moment in a day made of garbage. I'm so proud of you. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Ice cream cost money he didn't have. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, Daniel couldn't bring himself to say no. Not today. Not when her innocence was one of the last good things he had left. Sure, Lilybean, we can do that. They walked to the corner shop, the one that stayed open year-round despite the winter cold. Daniel bought her a single scoop of chocolate chip and watched her eat it with the focused concentration children brought to things that made them happy. For 10 minutes, the world narrowed to just this: his daughter, her ice cream, the winter sun struggling through November clouds. Then his phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a name he recognized: Marcus Webb, his old supervisor from the EMT volunteer program. Daniel had kept loosely in touch with Marcus over the years, occasional texts on birthdays and holidays. He answered. Marcus? Daniel. Marcus's voice was tight with tension. I just saw the news. What the hell happened? Long story. Short version, I did CPR on someone. Company decided it was assault. Fired me. That's insane. That's corporate America. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Listen, I made some calls. I know a lawyer who does employment cases. He's willing to talk to you, maybe take your case pro bono if the facts are solid. Hope, fragile and terrifying, flickered in Daniel's chest. Seriously? Yeah, his name's Robert Chen. No relation to the detective, different Chen. He's good, Daniel, really good. If anyone can fight this, he can. I can't pay him. He knows. That's why I called in a favor. But you need to meet with him soon before this gets any worse. Daniel watched Lily finish her ice cream, oblivious to the adult conversation happening 2 feet away. When? Tomorrow morning, if you're free. 10 a.m. I'll text you his office address. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by surviving this. Marcus's voice softened. You're a good guy, Daniel. You don't deserve what they're doing to you. Fight back. After hanging up, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in 24 hours. Possibility. Maybe this didn't have to end with him destroyed. Maybe there was still a path forward. But that night, after Lily was asleep, after Daniel had spent an hour searching job listings and sending applications that would probably go nowhere, his phone lit up with a notification. Someone had found his social media. His Facebook account, barely used, mostly pictures of Lily and a few shared articles about community events. In the past hour, he'd gotten 73 friend requests and over 200 messages. Most were hate, accusations, threats. People who knew nothing about him or what happened, convinced by headlines that he was a predator who deserved punishment. A few were different. I don't believe the media. Tell us what really happened. Stay strong, brother. The system is rigged against people like us. Daniel deleted the app from his phone before he could read more. Whatever support existed was drowned out by the vitriol, and his mental health couldn't afford to process it. He tried to sleep but managed only fitful dozing, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. What if the lawyer couldn't help? What if Langford Industries sued him? What if Child Services decided he couldn't provide for Lily and took her away? That last thought sent ice through his veins. He'd lost Sarah. He couldn't lose his daughter, too. Morning came gray and cold. Daniel got Lily ready for school through sheer autopilot, fed her cereal, walked her to class. The other parents seemed to be whispering more than usual, glancing his direction, then quickly looking away. He told himself he was imagining it. At 9:45, he stood outside a small office building in Center City, reading the directory. Robert Chen, attorney at law, Suite 304. Suite. Daniel took the elevator up, his stomach churning with nerves. The office was small but professional. Chen himself was in his 50s, gray at the temples, wearing a suit that had seen better days but was still respectable. He shook Daniel's hand firmly. Marcus spoke highly of you. Sit down. Tell me everything. For the third time in 2 days, Daniel recounted the story. But this time, Chen asked different questions. About his training, about the exact sequence of events, about witnesses and statements and documentation. When Daniel finished, Chen leaned back in his chair. Okay, here's the situation. You have a strong case for wrongful termination. The security footage, assuming Langford Industries doesn't destroy it, will prove you were performing legitimate first aid. Good Samaritan laws protect you from liability. They can't fire you for saving someone's life. They already did. Illegally, which is why we're going to sue them. Chen pulled out a legal pad. I'll take this pro bono, but I need you to understand what we're up against. Langford Industries has unlimited resources. They'll drag this out, bury us in motions, try to wait until you can't afford to keep fighting. So I'm screwed either way. Not necessarily. Chen's eyes sharpened. Because they have one massive vulnerability, the truth. If this goes to court, that security footage becomes public record. The executives who stood there doing nothing while you saved her life, their names, their faces, their complete failure, all of it exposed. Langford Industries does not want that story getting out. Understanding dawned. You think they'll settle? I think they'll try to make you go away quietly. The question is whether you're willing to fight long enough to force their hand. Daniel thought about Lily, about rent and food and insurance, about the burning need for justice warring with the practical necessity of survival. How long are we talking? Could be months, maybe a year, depends how hard they push back. Daniel's heart sank. He didn't have months, he had weeks at best. Chen seemed to read his thoughts. In the meantime, we file for an emergency restraining order against the company's defamation. Force them to issue a public correction about what really happened. That might help with employment prospects. It was something, not enough, but something. Okay, Daniel said. Let's do it, all of it. Chen nodded and extended his hand. Then we have an agreement. I'll file the paperwork today. And Daniel? Don't talk to any reporters. Don't post on social media. Don't give them anything they can use against you. Already learned that lesson. Walking out of Chen's office, Daniel felt the slightest shift in the weight crushing down on him. Not relief exactly, but the sense that he was no longer facing this alone. He had an advocate, someone fighting for him. It would have to be enough, because across town, in a private hospital room with a view of the Philadelphia skyline, Victoria Langford was waking from her second night of medically induced rest. And when the doctors explained what had happened, how close she'd come to dying, how someone had saved her, she would ask questions that no one wanted to answer. The truth, buried under corporate spin and manufactured narratives, was about to force its way back into the light. But Daniel didn't know that yet. All he knew was that he had to survive today. Then tomorrow. Then the day after that. One impossible day at a time. Victoria Langford woke to the antiseptic smell of hospital and the steady beep of monitors tracking her vital signs. Her throat felt raw, her chest ached with every breath, and her head throbbed where it had struck the conference table. For a confused moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why everything hurt. Then memory came flooding back in fragments. The presentation, the tightening in her chest, the floor rushing up to meet her. And then nothing but darkness and a terrible sensation of drowning, of trying to breathe through concrete. "Ms. Langford?" A nurse appeared at her bedside, professional smile in place. "Welcome back. How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a truck." Victoria's voice came out as a rasp. "What happened?" "You had a cardiac event during a meeting. You've been here for 2 days. The doctor will want to examine you now that you're awake." 2 days. Victoria tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her ribs. "My chest, bruised from CPR. That's normal. You're very lucky, Ms. Langford. Someone started compressions almost immediately. Saved your life." CPR. Someone had performed CPR on her. Victoria had a vague, dreamlike memory of pressure on her chest, of air being forced into her lungs, of fighting her way back from somewhere dark and cold. But the details were murky, lost in the fog of oxygen deprivation. "Who?" she asked. "Who did CPR?" The nurse's expression flickered, just for a second, but Victoria had built an empire reading people's micro-expressions. That was discomfort, maybe even guilt. "I'll get the doctor," the nurse said, dodging the question entirely. Over the next hour, Victoria was examined, poked, prodded, and connected to more machines. Dr. Okoye, her cardiologist, explained in careful detail that she'd suffered a myocardial infarction, a heart attack brought on by a previously undiagnosed arterial blockage. She was lucky to be alive. She'd need surgery eventually, but for now she was stable. "The person who performed CPR," Victoria pressed. "I want to thank them." "Who was it?" Dr. Okoye exchanged a glance with the nurse. "I think that's a question for your colleagues, Ms. Langford. They've been calling constantly to check on you." More evasion. Victoria's instincts, honed by decades of navigating corporate politics, started screaming that something was wrong. People didn't dodge simple questions about gratitude unless there was a reason. "Get Gregory Marks on the phone," she told the nurse. "Now." Marks arrived within 20 minutes, which told Victoria he'd been waiting nearby. Her CFO entered the hospital room looking simultaneously relieved and nervous, another red flag. "Victoria, thank God you're awake." He approached the bed cautiously. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone's been using my chest as a punching bag. Gregory, who did CPR on me?" Marks hesitated. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicated." He sighed, pulling up a chair. "It was one of the night janitors, Daniel Harper. He was on the floor when you collapsed, performed CPR until the paramedics arrived." A janitor. Not one of her executives with their Ivy League degrees and six-figure salaries. A janitor had saved her life while her leadership team did what? Exactly. I want to thank him, Victoria said. Bring him here. That's not possible. Why not? Marks shifted uncomfortably. We had to let him go. His actions during the incident raised concerns about appropriate conduct. There were witnesses who felt his behavior was... What are you talking about? Victoria's voice sharpened despite the pain it caused her throat. He saved my life and you fired him? It wasn't that simple. Victoria, you were unconscious, incapacitated, and he was putting his mouth on yours, his hands on your chest. Several executives expressed discomfort with how it looked. For a moment, Victoria could only stare at her CFO in disbelief. How it looked? Gregory, that's how CPR works. That's literally the medical procedure for someone whose heart has stopped. We understand that, but given the optics, the potential liability, show me the security footage. I don't think that's necessary. Gregory, Victoria's tone could have frozen nitrogen. I just woke up from a 2-day medically induced coma after nearly dying in my own conference room. I want to see exactly what happened. Get me that footage, now. Marks looked like he wanted to argue, but decades of working for Victoria had taught him when she wasn't accepting no for an answer. I'll have it sent to your tablet. He left, and Victoria lay back against her pillows, fury building beneath the pain and exhaustion. A janitor had saved her life. Her own executives, people she paid enormous salaries, people she trusted, had apparently stood around doing nothing. And then they'd fired the man who'd acted. The implications were staggering. The liability was enormous. But more than that, it was simply wrong in a way that made Victoria's blood boil. 30 minutes later, her tablet arrived via a very uncomfortable-looking junior executive who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. Victoria dismissed him and pulled up the security footage with shaking hands. The video was time-stamped from 3 camera angles covering the conference room. Victoria forced herself to watch objectively to see what had really happened rather than the fragments her oxygen-starved brain had retained. There she was, mid-presentation, confident and in control. Then her hand wavered. The stumble. The collapse. Her head striking the table, Victoria winced watching her own body crumple to the floor. And then nothing. For 7 eternal seconds that felt like hours watching the playback, 12 executives stood frozen. No one moved. No one helped. They just stared at her dying body with expressions ranging from shock to outright panic. Then a man burst through the conference room door. Young, thin, wearing a janitor's uniform. He pushed through the paralyzed crowd without hesitation and dropped to his knees beside her. Victoria watched him check her pulse, her breathing. Watched him position his hands on her sternum and begin compressions. Watched him count under his breath. She could see his lips moving, maintaining the rhythm. 30 compressions, then he tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and breathed air into her lungs. It didn't look inappropriate. It looked desperate. It looked like a man fighting death with everything he had. The executives around him were shouting. Victoria could see their mouths moving, their gestures. Some looked horrified. Some backed away. Not one of them helped. The janitor, Daniel Harper, kept going. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, over and over. His face was set in grim determination, sweat visible on his forehead, even through the grainy security footage. At one point, Gregory Marks actually tried to pull him away, and Daniel shoved him off without breaking rhythm. The video showed 3 minutes and 47 seconds of continuous CPR before Victoria's body finally convulsed. Daniel rolled her onto her side as she vomited, supporting her head, keeping her airway clear. Only when she started breathing on her own did he sit back, his whole body sagging with exhaustion and relief. Then security arrived, and instead of thanking him, instead of acknowledging what he'd done, they grabbed his arms and pulled him away from her. The last shot showed Daniel being escorted out while Victoria lay gasping on the floor, surrounded by executives who'd let her die. Victoria replayed the footage 3 times, her fury growing with each viewing. This man had saved her life while everyone else did nothing, and they'd repaid him by destroying his. She reached for her phone and called Gregory Marks. "I need Daniel Harper's personnel file," she said without preamble, "and I need the name of whoever authorized his termination." "Victoria, you should be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead, which I would be if not for that man. Get me the information, now." The file arrived within the hour. Victoria read through it carefully, building a picture of Daniel Harper's life. 34 years old, widower, single father to a 7-year-old daughter. Employed at Langford Industries for 14 months with perfect attendance and 0 disciplinary issues. Previous work history showed a pattern of low-wage service jobs, though there was a note about EMT volunteer training from several years back. That explained the CPR proficiency. He hadn't just been lucky or brave, he'd been trained. The termination paperwork made Victoria's jaw clench. Reason for dismissal: inappropriate conduct with executive personnel. No investigation, no hearing, just immediate termination authorized by Jennifer Walsh in HR at Gregory Marks's direction. Victoria picked up her phone again. "Jennifer, this is Victoria Langford. I'm looking at Daniel Harper's termination paperwork. Explain to me how we fired the man who saved my life for inappropriate conduct." Walsh's voice was carefully neutral. "Ms. Langford, given your condition at the time and the nature of the physical contact, we felt it was prudent to..." He performed CPR. "Yes, but without proper certification or authorization. I wasn't breathing, Jennifer. My heart had stopped." "Authorization?" Victoria's voice rose despite the pain it caused. "From whom exactly? My corpse?" "We had to consider the company's liability exposure." "The company's liability?" Victoria laughed, sharp and bitter. "Let me tell you about liability. We have 12 executives on camera watching me die without lifting a finger. We have security footage proving Daniel Harper saved my life using textbook CPR technique. And we have paperwork showing we fired him for it within 24 hours. Do you have any idea the lawsuit that's coming?" Silence on the other end of the line. "I want him rehired," Victoria continued. "Full back pay, formal apology, and compensation for damages. Make it happen." "Ms. Langford, I'm not sure that's wise. I don't recall asking for your opinion. Make it happen." Victoria hung up and immediately regretted the burst of energy. Pain radiated through her chest, and the monitor started beeping frantically. A nurse rushed in, fussing over her, adjusting medications, insisting she rest. But Victoria couldn't rest, not while Daniel Harper was out there paying the price for her life. She pulled out her tablet again, this time searching news coverage. What she found made her blood run cold. Headlines painted Daniel as, at best, a boundary crosser, at worst, something much darker. Janitor fired after incident with CEO. Questions raised about appropriate emergency response. The articles were carefully worded to avoid outright accusation, but the implication was clear. The comment sections were worse. Thousands of strangers who knew nothing about what happened, convinced they knew everything, calling for Daniel's arrest, threatening violence, doxing him with frightening efficiency. Victoria found his address within 5 minutes of searching. A 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that gentrification had bypassed. She pulled up street view images, crumbling facades, broken sidewalks, the kind of place people ended up when options ran out. This was where the man who saved her life lived, while she recovered in a private hospital room that cost more per day than his monthly rent. The injustice of it burned. But reading the news coverage, Victoria realized something that chilled her. The damage was done. Even if she rehired Daniel, even if she issued a public statement, the internet had already decided his guilt. His name was poisoned now. No employer would touch him. His life was effectively over because of her company, because of her executives, because she'd been unconscious and unable to protect the man who'd protected her. Victoria Langford hadn't built a pharmaceutical empire by accepting situations she couldn't change. She'd built it by changing the situations that were unacceptable. She made 3 phone calls. The first was to her head of corporate communications. "I need you to draft a statement, not from the company, from me personally, explaining exactly what happened, praising Daniel Harper, and making it crystal clear that anyone who has a problem with him saving my life can direct their complaints to me. I want it released today." The second was to her personal lawyer. "I need you to find out if Daniel Harper has legal representation. If he doesn't, provide it. Best employment attorney in Philadelphia. All costs covered by me personally, not the company. And make it clear this isn't charity, it's what he's owed." The third call was to her driver. "I need you to find an address for me, Daniel Harper. Then I need you to take me there." "Ms. Langford," Dr. Okoye protested, having walked in during that last call. You can't leave the hospital. You need at least another 2 days of observation. Then observe me remotely. Victoria was already disconnecting her non-essential monitors. I have something I need to do. You had a heart attack 48 hours ago. And I'll have another one if I don't fix this. Victoria met the doctor's eyes. That man saved my life. My company destroyed his. I can't undo the damage from a hospital bed. Dr. Okoye studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Against my strong medical advice, and only if you promise to return immediately if you feel any chest pain, shortness of breath, or dizziness. Deal. Getting dressed was harder than Victoria expected. Her ribs screamed with every movement, and exhaustion pulled at her like gravity. But she forced herself upright, forced herself into the clothes her assistant had brought, forced herself to function through sheer willpower. The same willpower that had built Langford Industries from nothing. Her driver had the car waiting at the hospital's private exit. Victoria slid into the back seat, her body protesting every movement. The address you wanted, Ms. Langford. He handed her a piece of paper. It's about 20 minutes from here. The drive took them from the gleaming towers of downtown into neighborhoods that told a different story about Philadelphia. Buildings that needed paint, streets that needed repair. People who looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. This was the world Victoria's wealth insulated her from. The world where Daniel Harper lived. The apartment building was worse in person than it had looked on Street View. The intercom was broken, the lobby door hung slightly crooked, and the elevator had an out-of-order sign that looked months old. I'll be right back, Victoria told her driver, ignoring his concerned expression. The stairs nearly killed her. By the second floor, her chest was tight and her breathing labored. By the third, she was genuinely worried Dr. Okoye's dire warnings might come true. But she pushed on, gripping the railing, taking each step as a small victory. Fourth floor, apartment 4C. Victoria stood outside the door, trying to catch her breath, trying to figure out what she was going to say to the man who'd saved her life and then had it destroyed by her company. She knocked. No answer. Knocked again. The door across the hall opened and an elderly Asian woman peered out. He's not home. At work. Do you know when he'll be back? The woman studied Victoria with shrewd eyes, taking in the expensive clothes, the obvious wealth. You a reporter? No, I'm... Victoria paused. I'm Victoria Langford. Recognition flashed across the woman's face, followed by something that might have been anger. You're the one he saved. Yes. And your company fired him for it. Yes. No point denying it. That's why I'm here. I want to make it right. Mrs. Chen, that's what her mailbox said, looked skeptical. Little late for that. He can't find work. Bills piling up. Had to take his daughter to a food bank yesterday. You know what that does to a man's pride, having to beg for food because he saved someone's life? The words hit Victoria like physical blows. Food banks. Because of her. Because her executives had cared more about liability than justice. Where is he now? Victoria asked quietly. Day labor site on Market Street. Stands in a parking lot hoping someone needs an extra pair of hands for $8 an hour. Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. That's what your gratitude looks like. Victoria didn't trust herself to speak. She nodded, turned, and made her way back down the stairs on legs that shook from more than exertion. Market Street day labor site was exactly as depressing as Mrs. Chen's description suggested. A parking lot surrounded by chain-link fence where men gathered in the early morning hoping contractors would hire them for temporary work. By mid-afternoon, only the unlucky remained. Daniel Harper stood near the fence, hands in his pockets against the November cold, looking exhausted and defeated in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Victoria's driver pulled up to the curb. She rolled down her window. Daniel Harper? He turned, suspicious of the luxury sedan, then froze when he saw her face. Ms. Langford? I need to talk to you, please. Daniel approached the car slowly, his expression unreadable. Up close, Victoria could see the toll the past few days had taken. Dark circles under his eyes. The hollow look of someone who wasn't eating enough. The wary posture of someone who'd learned to expect the worst. I'm sorry, Victoria said. It came out rougher than she intended, emotion and damaged throat combining. For everything. For what my company did to you. for not speaking up sooner. You were unconscious, Daniel said flatly. Hard to speak up when you're in a coma. I'm awake now, and I'm here to fix this. You can't. Simple. Final. The voice of someone who'd already accepted his fate. My name's been destroyed. Even if you rehire me, even if you issue a statement, it doesn't matter. The internet decided I'm guilty. That doesn't just go away. Victoria pushed the car door open. Get in. We need to talk. I don't think... Please. It came out as a plea, not a command. You saved my life. The least you can do is hear me out. Daniel hesitated, then climbed into the back seat. He sat as far from Victoria as possible, his whole body radiating discomfort. I watched the security footage, Victoria said. All of it. I saw what you did. I saw my executives stand there doing nothing while I died. I saw you fight to save me. And I saw them punish you for it. Daniel stared out the window. Doesn't change anything. It changes everything. I'm issuing a public statement today explaining exactly what happened. I'm providing you with legal representation to sue Langford Industries for wrongful termination, and I'm personally ensuring you're compensated for what you've lost. I don't want your money. The statement was so unexpected that Victoria actually laughed. Everyone wants money. Not like this, what? Guilt payment? Conscience clearing? Daniel finally looked at her and his eyes were hard. You want to make yourself feel better about what happened? Fine. Issue your statement, but don't pretend you're doing this for me. I'm doing it because it's right. You're doing it because you're worried about lawsuits and bad publicity. Daniel's voice was bitter. If I died? If your executives had stood around and I'd just been another body? You wouldn't care. But I survived, and now I'm a liability. So you're here to manage the damage. Every word was a knife precisely placed. And the worst part was Victoria couldn't entirely argue with his logic. How much of this was genuine gratitude versus damage control? Where did her moral responsibility end and corporate self-preservation begin? You're right, she said finally. About some of it. I am worried about lawsuits, I'm worried about publicity, but I'm also here because watching that footage made me physically sick. My people let me die. You saved me, and you were punished for it. That's wrong in a way that has nothing to do with corporate liability. Daniel was quiet for a moment. What do you want from me? Nothing. I want to give you back what was taken, your job, your reputation, your future. My job? Daniel laughed harshly. I don't want to work for Langford Industries. I don't want to clean your offices while everyone whispers about me. I don't want to be the charity case CEO saved because she felt guilty. Then what do you want? The question seemed to catch Daniel off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it, struggled to find words. Finally, I want my daughter to have food. I want to make rent. I want to sleep without nightmares about losing everything. I want things I had before I decided to help you. Victoria reached into her purse, pulled out a checkbook. Daniel's expression closed off immediately. This isn't charity, Victoria said before he could object. Consider it a down payment on the lawsuit you're going to win against my company. Robert Chen, your new attorney, will explain the details. But right now, today, I'm giving you enough to cover your immediate needs while the legal process plays out. She wrote a check, her hands shaking slightly. $50,000. Enough to cover rent, food, bills, and breathing room for several months. She held it out. Daniel didn't take it. I can't. You can. You must. Because this isn't about me or my guilt. It's about your daughter, and you're too good a father to let pride hurt her. The mention of Lily visibly affected him. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the check. This doesn't make us even, he said quietly. I know. Nothing makes us even. You gave me my life back. All I can do is try to give you yours. They sat in silence for a moment, the car idling at the curb, two people from completely different worlds connected by one terrible, life-changing moment. I need to get back, Daniel finally said. I have to pick up my daughter from school. I'll have my driver take you. I'd rather walk. Of course he would, because accepting a ride felt like accepting more than he could handle. Victoria understood that. She'd built her company on understanding what people could and couldn't accept. Then I'll have the driver take me to my lawyer's office. I need to get the defamation restraining order filed before end of business today. Daniel opened the car door but paused before getting out. Thank you for the check, for the lawyer, for believing me. I should be thanking you, Victoria said. You gave me another chance at life. I plan to use it better than I did the first time around. He nodded and walked away, the check folded in his pocket, his shoulders a little less slumped than when he'd climbed into the car. Victoria watched him go, then told her driver to take her back to the hospital. She'd already pushed her recovering body too far, and the exhaustion was catching up with her. But as they drove back toward downtown, she pulled out her phone and started making more calls. To her PR team, I want billboards, I want op-eds, I want every major news outlet in Philadelphia to know Daniel Harper's name as the man who saved my life, not as a scandal. Spend whatever it takes. To her board of directors, emergency meeting tomorrow morning. We're discussing a complete overhaul of how this company handles employee relations and emergency response protocols. And we're starting with accepting responsibility for what happened to Daniel Harper. To Jennifer Walsh in HR, you're fired. Effective immediately. Clean out your desk. The last call made Victoria feel slightly better. Not enough, but it was a start. By the time she made it back to her hospital room, Dr. Okoye was waiting with an expression that could melt steel. You have a death wish, the doctor said flatly. I had something I needed to do. And did you do it? Victoria thought about Daniel walking away with $50,000 he didn't want to take. About the lawyer who would fight for him. About the public statement that would go out tonight, reshaping the narrative. About the small, inadequate steps toward justice. I started, she said. I started. She let the doctor reconnect her to monitors, let the nurses fuss over her elevated heart rate and blood pressure, let herself sink back into the hospital bed that cost a fortune and promised safety. But Victoria's mind was already racing ahead. Compensation wasn't enough. Public statements weren't enough. She owed Daniel Harper more than money or words. She owed him a future. And Victoria Langford always paid her debts. The check sat on Daniel's kitchen table like a live grenade. $50,000, more money than he'd ever held at one time in his entire life, written in Victoria Langford's precise handwriting. He'd cashed it that afternoon at a check-cashing place that took an obscene percentage but didn't ask questions, and now the stack of bills felt like both salvation and damnation. Lily was doing homework at the same table, her math worksheet spread out beside the money Daniel had quickly covered with a newspaper when she'd come home from school. She hummed while she worked, oblivious to the fact that her father's entire world had shifted in the span of a single conversation. Daddy, what's 8 times 7? 56, sweetheart. Thanks. She scribbled the answer, then looked up at him with those two perceptive eyes. You seem different today. Different how? Less sad, still worried, but different worried. Daniel managed a smile that felt almost real. Just had a good day, that's all. It wasn't a lie exactly. Victoria Langford, showing up at the day labor site, looking half dead herself but determined to make things right, had cracked something open in Daniel's chest. Not hope exactly, he'd learned better than to trust hope, but possibility. The idea that maybe he wasn't alone in this fight. His phone buzzed. Robert Chen, the attorney Marcus had connected him with. Daniel, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. Victoria Langford's legal team just delivered something you need to see. What kind of something? The kind that changes everything. Can you be here at 9? Daniel glanced at Lily, mentally calculating. Mrs. Chen could take her to school. I'll be there. That night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel sat on his apartment's fire escape despite the November cold, looking out over Philadelphia's nighttime sprawl. Somewhere out there, Victoria Langford was in a hospital bed, recovering from the heart attack that had bound their lives together. Somewhere out there, the executives who'd watched her die were probably sleeping peacefully, insulated by wealth and power from any real consequences. And here he was, a night shift janitor with a stack of money he hadn't earned and didn't want, trying to figure out what came next. His phone lit up with a news alert. Langford Industries CEO releases statement about cardiac arrest incident. Daniel's heart hammered as he opened the article. Victoria's statement was there in full, and it was nothing like the corporate doublespeak he'd expected. On the evening of November 6th, I suffered a cardiac arrest during an executive meeting. I stopped breathing. My heart stopped beating. Without immediate intervention, I would have died within minutes. Daniel Harper, a maintenance worker at Langford Industries, performed CPR that saved my life. He acted with courage, skill, and compassion while others, including myself, were unable to help. I owe him my life. The suggestion that his actions were anything other than heroic is not only false, but deeply unjust. I have provided Mr. Harper with legal representation to pursue claims against Langford Industries for wrongful termination. I take full responsibility for the failures of leadership that led to his mistreatment. Daniel Harper is a hero. He deserves to be recognized as such. The statement was already going viral. The comments section was split between people apologizing for jumping to conclusions and others doubling down on their original judgments, but the narrative was shifting, slowly, painfully, but shifting. Daniel read it 3 times, then closed his phone and let the cold November air sting his face. It was a start. Not redemption, not restoration, but a start. The next morning, Robert Chen's office felt different than it had during their first meeting. There was an energy in the air, a sense of forward momentum that Daniel hadn't dared to feel before. Chen gestured to a thick folder on his desk. Langford Industries' legal team delivered this yesterday evening. It's a settlement offer. Daniel's stomach dropped. I thought we were going to court. We were. We still can if you want. But you need to see what they're offering first. Chen opened the folder, spreading documents across his desk. Full reinstatement with back pay, public apology from the company, compensation for emotional distress and reputational damage in the amount of $250,000. And this is the interesting part. They're offering you a position in a newly created Employee Welfare and Safety Division, reporting directly to Victoria Langford. The numbers didn't make sense. The whole thing didn't make sense. They're offering me $250,000 and a promotion? They're offering you a settlement that keeps this out of court and out of the news cycle. But yes, it's a substantial offer. Chen leaned back. The job is real, from what I can tell. Langford wants to create a division focused on protecting workers, especially those in positions without power or voice. She wants you to help build it. Why me? Because you're the perfect proof of concept. The invisible worker who saved the CEO's life and got crushed by the system for it. If she's serious about reform, having you visible and empowered sends a message. Daniel stared at the papers, his mind racing. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. What's the catch? Standard non-disclosure agreement about the settlement amount. You can't discuss the specifics of what happened during the termination process, but you can talk about the CPR, the wrongful firing, all of that. They're not trying to silence you, they're trying to contain the financial exposure. And if I say no, if I want my day in court? Chen was quiet for a moment. Then we go to trial. It could take a year, maybe more. We'd probably win, but there's no guarantee the judgment would be larger than what they're offering now. And trials are exhausting, Daniel. They'll dig into every aspect of your life, your finances, your past, your dead wife's medical bills. They'll try to find anything to make you look bad. So I take the deal and let them off easy. You take the deal and get your life back, plus a platform to actually change things. Chen met his eyes. This isn't about letting them off easy. It's about choosing which battle to fight. Do you want to punish Langford Industries, or do you want to build something that prevents this from happening to the next person? Daniel thought about the day labor site, the men standing in the cold, hoping for $8 an hour, the invisible workers cleaning offices after hours, one mistake away from losing everything. People like him, who the system chewed up and spit out without a second thought. If I take this job, I want real authority, not some token position where they trot me out for photo ops and ignore everything I say. According to the offer, you'd report directly to Langford. That's about as much authority as you can get without being on the board. I want it in writing that they can't fire me without cause. And I want cause defined very specifically. Chen smiled. Now you're thinking like someone who's been screwed by corporate America. I'll negotiate those terms. They spent the next 2 hours going through the settlement line by line, Chen explaining the legal jargon, Daniel pushing back on anything that felt like a trap. By the time they finished, Daniel's head was spinning. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "You have 72 hours to respond. Use them." Chen walked him to the door. "But Daniel, this is a good offer. Better than good. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want, not just what you think you deserve." The walk back to his apartment took Daniel through neighborhoods that told Philadelphia's story in architecture and economics, gleaming new developments butting up against 100-year-old row homes. Coffee shops charging $6 for a latte next to bodegas where $6 bought lunch. The city was a study in contrast, and Daniel had always existed firmly on one side of that divide. This job offer, if it was real, would move him to the other side. The thought was terrifying. Mrs. Chen was waiting by his apartment door when he arrived, her expression troubled. "Someone came looking for you. Reporter, I think. Asked a lot of questions about you and Lily." Ice flooded Daniel's veins. "What kind of questions?" "About your wife. About money. About whether you'd ever been in trouble with the law." Mrs. Chen's face hardened. "I told him to leave or I'd call the police. But Daniel, if they're digging into your life..." "I know." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "It's going to get worse before it gets better." Inside his apartment, Daniel pulled up news coverage on his laptop. Victoria's statement had changed the narrative, but it had also intensified the scrutiny. Now everyone wanted the full story. Who was Daniel Harper really? What was his history? Could he be trusted? The invasive questions made his skin crawl, but Chen had been right. If this went to trial, it would be so much worse. His phone rang. Unknown number, but something made him answer. "Mr. Harper, this is Amanda Reeves from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm doing a follow-up piece on your story, and I'd love to get your perspective." No comment. "I understand you're probably overwhelmed right now, but the public is really interested in hearing from you directly. Your side of what happened. You mean you want me to say something you can take out of context and turn into another headline?" Daniel's patience snapped. "I saved a woman's life. That's the whole story. Everything else is noise." "But surely you have feelings about how you were treated." "Yeah, I do. I feel like people should mind their own business and let me put my life back together. How's that for a quote?" He hung up before she could respond, then immediately regretted it. That soundbite, "mind their own business," could be spun as hostile or defensive. Chen had told him not to talk to reporters, and he'd just done it anyway. This was the tightrope he'd have to walk if he took Langford's offer. Public enough to be visible, careful enough to avoid becoming a target again. That evening, Lily asked the question Daniel had been dreading. "Daddy, why were there reporters at school today?" His blood ran cold. "What reporters?" "Outside the gates." "Mrs. Peterson said we weren't supposed to talk to them. Some of the other kids said they were asking about you." Lily's voice got small. "Did you do something bad?" Daniel knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his. "No, baby, I didn't do anything bad. I helped someone who was sick, and some people got confused about it, but it's being fixed now. The kids were saying mean things about you." Kids repeat what they hear from adults. It doesn't make it true. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to be in trouble, Huck." "I'm not in trouble, I promise." Daniel pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake with held-back sobs. "Everything's going to be okay. We might even be moving to a better place soon." "Really?" "Maybe. I'm working on it." He pulled back, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "But no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you remember this. I did the right thing, and doing the right thing is always worth it, even when it's hard." Lily nodded, not fully understanding but trusting him anyway. That trust was both a gift and a terrible responsibility. After she went to bed, Daniel pulled out the settlement papers and read them again. $250,000. A real job with real authority. The chance to build something that might protect other workers from what he'd experienced. It was more than he'd dared to hope for, which meant there had to be a catch he wasn't seeing. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he opened it. "You don't deserve this. You're a predator and everyone knows it. Watch your back." Then another. Hope your daughter understands what kind of man her father really is." Daniel's hands shook. The threats were getting more specific, more personal. He took screenshots, sent them to Chen, then blocked the numbers. But more would come. They always did. The next morning, Daniel stood outside Langford Industries for the first time since being escorted out by security. The building looked the same, glass and steel and money, but Daniel felt different, not powerless anymore, not invisible. He'd called ahead, and Victoria's assistant had arranged for him to meet with her at 10 a.m. The receptionist recognized him immediately, her professional smile faltering for just a moment before recovering. "Mr. Harper, Miss Langford is expecting you. 43rd floor." The elevator ride up felt surreal. Last time Daniel had been in this building, he'd been running toward a medical emergency. Now he was walking toward a future he couldn't quite wrap his mind around. Victoria was waiting in a conference room. Not the one where she'd collapsed, Daniel noted. She looked better than she had at the day labor site, but still fragile. The kind of fragile that came from a body betraying its owner and barely surviving the experience. "Daniel, thank you for coming," she gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." They sat across from each other, two people bound by trauma and consequence, trying to navigate an impossible situation. "Your attorney showed you the offer," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. "He did." "And?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "It's generous. More than generous, which makes me wonder what you're really buying." Victoria's expression didn't change. "I'm buying a chance to fix what my company broke, and I'm offering you a chance to prevent it from happening to others. By putting the janitor who saved your life on your payroll. Great PR story." "It is a great PR story," Victoria agreed, not rising to the bait. "It's also the right thing to do. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. What happens when the cameras go away and you realize having me around is inconvenient? When I push back on policies you don't want to change? When being the conscience of your company becomes more trouble than it's worth? Then you push back harder." Victoria leaned forward slightly, wincing at the movement. "I'm not offering you a symbolic position, Daniel. I'm offering you real power. Because the truth is, I don't know how to fix what's broken in my company. I've spent 20 years building it, and I was blind to how it treats people like you. I need someone who sees what I can't. And you think that's me? I think you're someone who risked everything to save a stranger's life. That kind of moral compass is rare, especially at the executive level." Daniel studied her face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. "If I take this job, people are going to say I'm selling out, taking hush money, playing into your hands." "People are already saying worse things about both of us." Victoria's voice was dry. "We can't control the narrative completely. We can only control our actions." "I want protection," Daniel said. "Not just for me, for Lily. Reporters showed up at her school. Someone sent me death threats mentioning her by name. If I'm going to be public, if I'm going to be the face of your redemption arc, my daughter needs to be safe." "Done. I'll arrange private security. Discreet, but effective. And I want the authority to actually investigate complaints, to fire people if necessary, to change policies without running everything through legal. You'll have it. Within reason. I can't give you unlimited power to blow up the company, but meaningful authority, yes." Daniel took a breath. "Then I'll take the job, on one condition." "What's that?" "The first thing we investigate is what happened in that conference room, not the CPR, everything after. I want to know who decided to fire me, who spread the rumors, who tried to bury the truth, and I want accountability. Real accountability, not just some executives getting a stern talking to." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Some of those people are friends of mine, colleagues I've worked with for years." "Then you'll learn who your real friends are." "Fair enough." Victoria extended her hand across the table. "Do we have a deal?" Daniel looked at her hand, manicured, professional, belonging to someone from a completely different world than his. Taking it would change everything, would make him complicit in a system he'd always existed outside of, would put him in a position of power he'd never asked for and wasn't sure he wanted. But it would also give him the chance to protect people like the men at the day labor site, like the night shift workers cleaning offices while executives partied, like everyone who'd ever been told they were invisible and expendable. He shook her hand. "We have a deal." The paperwork took 3 days to finalize. Chen negotiated every clause, every protection, making sure Daniel wasn't signing away his rights or his voice. When it was done, Daniel had a contract that guaranteed him a salary that made his head spin, benefits that covered everything from health insurance to housing assistance, and genuine authority to investigate and reform Langford Industries' employment practices. He also had a target on his back that would never fully go away. The press conference announcing his new position was Victoria's idea. "Control the narrative," she'd said. "Let them see you as a person, not a headline." Daniel stood in front of cameras for the first time in his life, Victoria beside him, their unlikely partnership on full display. Reporters shouted questions over each other, hungry for sound bites. "Mr. Harper, how do you respond to critics who say you're being bought off?" "I'd say they don't understand what accountability looks like. Langford Industries made a mistake. They're taking steps to fix it. I'm here to make sure those steps actually mean something." "Ms. Langford, why create this position now?" "Because almost dying gives you perspective on what matters. I built a company that saved my life financially, but nearly cost me my actual life because the people around me were too paralyzed by hierarchy to act. That needs to change." "Mr. Harper, what's your message to other workers who feel invisible or mistreated?" Daniel thought about Mrs. Chen, about Tommy from the cleaning crew, about every person who'd ever been told to stay silent and be grateful for minimum wage and no benefits. Document everything, know your rights, and never let anyone convince you that your humanity is negotiable just because you don't have power. Systems only change when people refuse to accept them. The clip went viral within hours. Some people praised his courage. Others called him a hypocrite. But the conversation had shifted. It wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about systemic change. 2 weeks later, Daniel moved into a modest but clean apartment in a better neighborhood. Nothing extravagant. He wasn't ready for that kind of shift, but a place with working elevators and heat that didn't require prayer. Lily got her own room for the first time since Sarah died, and watching her decorate it with drawings and stuffed animals made something in Daniel's chest unclench slightly. On his first official day in his new position, Daniel walked into Langford Industries through the front door instead of the service entrance. He rode the elevator to the 44th floor, where his new office waited. It wasn't huge, but it had windows and a door that closed and a nameplate that read Daniel Harper, Director of Employee Welfare and Safety. His first meeting was with the executive team, the same people who'd watched Victoria collapse, the same people who'd authorized his firing. They sat around the conference table looking uncomfortable, these powerful men and women facing the janitor they'd tried to erase. Gregory Marks spoke first, his tone carefully neutral. "Mr. Harper, welcome to the executive team." "Thank you." Daniel opened his laptop, pulling up his first presentation. "I've been reviewing employment records and incident reports from the past 3 years. We're going to talk about patterns of retaliation against workers who file complaints, the systematic underpayment of night shift staff, and the complete absence of whistleblower protections. This should take about 2 hours." The discomfort in the room intensified. "Good. They should be uncomfortable." Victoria, sitting at the head of the table, caught his eye and nodded slightly. Permission. Support. Backing. Daniel began his presentation, and with each slide, each damning statistic, each story of workers mistreated and disregarded, he felt something shift. Not power, exactly. Purpose. He'd been given a second chance, not just at employment or financial stability, but at meaning, at making sure no one else had to choose between doing the right thing and surviving. It wouldn't be easy. The executives resisted every recommendation. The legal team fought every reform. The board questioned whether all this change was really necessary, but Daniel kept pushing, and Victoria kept backing him. And slowly, painfully, things began to shift. 3 months later, Langford Industries announced a comprehensive overhaul of their employment policies, whistleblower protections, fair wage standards, emergency response training for all staff, an independent review board for termination decisions. It wasn't everything, it wasn't enough, but it was a start. And Daniel Harper, the night shift janitor who'd saved a CEO's life and nearly lost everything for it, was finally exactly where he needed to be. Not invisible anymore, not powerless anymore. Just a man trying to build something better from the wreckage of what had almost destroyed him. 6 months into his new role, Daniel stood in front of the bathroom mirror in his apartment, adjusting a tie that still felt foreign against his throat. The man looking back at him was someone he barely recognized, clean-shaven, rested, wearing a suit that actually fit, but the eyes were the same. Still wary, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Daddy, you look fancy." Lily bounced into the bathroom, her backpack already on for school. 8 years old now, growing so fast it made Daniel's chest ache. "Is today the big speech?" "Big speech is tonight, sweetheart. Today's just regular meetings." Daniel knelt down, straightening her collar. "You ready for your math test?" "I studied all the multiplication tables like you showed me." She grinned, gap-toothed and proud. "Even the hard ones." "That's my girl." He kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar strawberry shampoo smell that still reminded him she was real. She was safe. They'd made it through the worst of it. The worst of it. 6 months ago, that had been living on the edge of disaster, one missed paycheck from homelessness. Now it was navigating corporate politics and death threats that still arrived occasionally, though security handled most of them before Daniel ever saw them. Different problems. Not easier, just different. The drive to Langford Industries had become routine, though Daniel still sometimes caught himself marveling at the company car, the reserved parking spot, the security guard who greeted him by name. Tommy Rodriguez, his old cleaning crew friend, had started calling him Corporate Daniel with a mix of pride and gentle mockery that kept him grounded. "Don't forget where you came from," Tommy had said just last week, sharing lunch in the employee cafeteria that Daniel had successfully fought to make accessible to all staff, not just executives. "You're one of us who made it out. Don't become one of them." Daniel thought about that warning as he rode the elevator to the 44th floor. Was he becoming one of them? The executives who'd stood frozen while Victoria died, more worried about liability than humanity? He'd implemented reforms, yes, changed policies. But was it enough? Could it ever be enough? His assistant, Maria, a sharp woman in her 30s who'd worked her way up from reception, handed him his schedule as he entered. Morning staff meeting in 10. Then you have the final review for the worker advocacy program at 2. And don't forget, the National Labor Conference keynote is at 7 tonight. The keynote. The speech that would put Daniel in front of 5,000 people, broadcast live. His story shared with a national audience. Victoria had arranged it, leveraging her connections to give him a platform. "Tell them what happened," she'd said. "Tell them what needs to change." The morning meeting was tense. Daniel was presenting the quarterly report on workplace incidents, and the numbers weren't good. 3 cases of retaliation against workers who'd filed complaints. 2 terminations that looked suspiciously like punishment for union organizing. A pattern of wage theft in the Philadelphia distribution center that accounting had tried to bury. Gregory Marks looked distinctly uncomfortable as Daniel walked through the findings. "These are serious accusations, Harper. Are you certain about the data?" "I'm certain about the documentation. 53 workers shorted on overtime pay over 6 months. That's not an accident, it's systematic theft." Daniel pulled up a spreadsheet. "And before you ask if I'm sure, yes, I verified every case personally. The financial impact of correcting this is significantly less than the legal impact of not correcting it. Plus, there's the minor detail that it's the right thing to do." Daniel's voice hardened. "We either pay what we owe, or I take this to the Department of Labor myself." The room went silent. This was the line Daniel had drawn 6 months ago and reinforced at every opportunity. He wouldn't be silenced, wouldn't be managed, wouldn't prioritize profit over people. Victoria, participating via video call from her home office, she'd been working reduced hours since the heart attack, spoke up. "Gregory, authorize the payments, and I want the managers responsible for this disciplined. Daniel, prepare a full report for the board." After the meeting, Daniel returned to his office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. Detective Sarah Chen sat in one of his chairs, looking official and slightly apologetic. "Detective, this is a surprise." "Mr. Harper, sorry to drop in unannounced." She stood, shaking his hand. "I wanted to update you personally. We closed the investigation into the threats you've been receiving." Daniel's stomach tightened. "And?" "We identified 3 individuals making credible threats. All have been charged. 2 accepted plea deals, one's going to trial." Chen's expression was grim. "I wish I could say this is over, but people like you, people who challenge systems, You'll always have targets on your backs. The security Victoria arranged is good. Keep them close. Is my daughter safe? As safe as we can make her. The threats against Lily specifically resulted in enhanced charges. Those people won't be a problem for a long time. Chen paused. For what it's worth, what you're doing matters. I've been a cop for 15 years. I've seen what happens when workers have no protection, no voice. You're changing that. After she left, Daniel sat alone in his office, looking out over Philadelphia. Somewhere down there, people were working jobs that paid too little, treated them like machinery, discarded them when convenient. He'd been one of them. Could be again, if this all fell apart. His phone buzzed. Marcus Webb, his old EMT supervisor. Daniel, you sitting down? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Your story, the worker protection stuff you're doing, it's spreading. I've got 3 other companies in Philly asking about implementing similar programs. They want you to consult. Daniel's mind reeled. Consult? Yeah, man. You're becoming a thing. The guy who saved the CEO and then reformed the whole system. People want what you built at Langford. It was too much, too fast. Daniel had just been trying to survive, to protect his daughter, to make sure what happened to him didn't happen to others. Now it was becoming something bigger than he'd imagined. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You saved a woman's life when everyone else froze. You fought back when they tried to destroy you. You're ready for anything. Marcus's voice was warm. Trust yourself, brother. You've earned this. That afternoon's review of the worker advocacy program brought better news. In 6 months, they'd processed over 200 worker complaints, resolved 80% without legal action, and terminated 5 managers for documented abuse. Exit interviews showed dramatically improved morale. Retention rates were up 23%. The program was working. Imperfectly, incompletely, but working. Victoria joined the meeting in person, moving carefully but stronger than she'd been in months. The surgery to repair her arterial blockage had been successful, and she'd thrown herself into recovery with the same intensity she brought to business. These numbers are remarkable, she said, reviewing the data. Daniel, I want to expand this. Create similar divisions in all our regional offices. Train directors in each location. That's a massive undertaking. It's a necessary one. What almost killed me wasn't just my heart. It was a culture that prioritized hierarchy over humanity. We're changing that, but it can't just be here. It has to be everywhere. After the meeting, Victoria asked Daniel to stay behind. They sat across from each other in the same conference room where she'd collapsed 8 months ago. The room had been redecorated since then, but the weight of history remained. How are you really doing? Victoria asked. Not the corporate answer, the truth. Daniel considered lying, giving the polished response he'd learned to deliver in meetings. But Victoria had earned honesty. I'm tired. Every day feels like fighting. Fighting the executives who resent me. Fighting the critics who think I sold out. Fighting my own imposter syndrome that says I don't belong here. He paused. But I'm also hopeful? Maybe for the first time since Sarah died. Like what I'm doing actually matters. It does matter. You matter. Victoria's voice was firm. I know I've said this before, but I need you to hear it again. You saved my life. Not just in that conference room. You saved it by showing me what my company had become. By forcing me to see the people I'd made invisible. That's a debt I can never fully repay. You don't owe me anything. We're even. We're not even. We never will be. But we can be partners. Equals working toward the same goal. She slid a folder across the table. Speaking of which, I have a proposal. Daniel opened it. Inside was a contract making him not just director, but vice president of employee relations, with a board seat and equity in the company. You're giving me ownership? I'm giving you power. Real structural power that can't be taken away by whoever comes after me. You'll be an owner, not just an employee. Your voice will be permanent. Daniel stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly. This was everything he'd never dared to want. Security, authority, a seat at the table where decisions got made. Why? Because I'm 52 years old with a damaged heart. I need to think about succession, about what happens to everything we're building if I'm not here to protect it. I trust you to carry this forward, to keep fighting even when it's hard. I don't have business training. I barely finished community college. You have something better. You have integrity. You understand what's at stake because you've lived it. Victoria's eyes were fierce. Say yes, Daniel. Take the seat. Make them listen. He thought about Lily, about the future he wanted to build for her. A future where workers had dignity, where doing the right thing didn't mean losing everything, where systems served people instead of the other way around. Okay, he said. Yes, I'll take it. That evening, Daniel stood backstage at the Philadelphia Convention Center, listening to the crowd settle into their seats. 5,000 labor organizers, union representatives, worker advocates, and activists, all waiting to hear his story. His phone buzzed with messages. Tommy, watching the live stream. Don't mess up, corporate Daniel. Marcus, you got this, brother. Mrs. Chen, Lily and I are so proud. Knock them dead. And one from Victoria. Tell the truth. That's all you've ever needed to do. The introduction began. Someone Daniel didn't know reciting his biography like it belonged to someone else. From night shift janitor to vice president. From victim of the system to architect of change. Please welcome Daniel Harper. The applause was thunderous. Daniel walked onto the stage, blinking against the lights, seeing nothing but shadows and brightness. He reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at 5,000 people who'd come to hear him speak. For a moment, panic seized him. What did he have to say that mattered? What authority did a former janitor have to lecture about corporate reform? Then he remembered. He'd saved a woman's life and been punished for it. That gave him all the authority he needed. 8 months ago, Daniel began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I was a single father working night shifts as a janitor, trying to make rent and feed my daughter on wages that barely covered basics. I was invisible to the people whose offices I cleaned, just another face in the background, easy to ignore, easier to forget. The room was silent, listening. Then I did something that changed my life. I saved my boss's life, performed CPR when she collapsed during a heart attack. And within 24 hours, I was fired, publicly shamed, and fighting to survive. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd crossed an invisible line. Because people like me aren't supposed to put our hands on people like her, even to save their lives. He paused, letting that sink in. I'm standing here tonight because I got lucky. Because the woman I saved had the courage to question what happened. Because I had access to legal help. Because the security footage existed to prove the truth. But how many workers aren't that lucky? How many lose their jobs, their reputations, their futures, and never get justice? The crowd murmured in recognition. They knew. They'd seen it, lived it. The system isn't broken, Daniel continued. It's working exactly as designed, to protect power, to punish dissent, to keep workers invisible and disposable. And we've accepted it because we're told that's just how things are. That if we work hard enough, stay quiet enough, maybe we'll be okay. His voice rose, passion bleeding through. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie. The system only works this way because we let it, because we've been convinced that we're powerless, that change is impossible, that the best we can hope for is survival. He gripped the podium, leaning forward. I'm proof that's not true. Not because I'm special, not because I'm smarter or braver than anyone else, but because when I was pushed to the edge, I refused to disappear. And when I was given the chance to build something better, I didn't let perfect be the enemy of good. I just started. One policy at a time, one worker complaint at a time, one small victory at a time. The applause started building, but Daniel wasn't finished. In 6 months, we've changed how Langford Industries treats 15,000 workers. We've recovered stolen wages. We've fired abusive managers. We've built protection systems that make it harder to retaliate against people who speak up. And you know what we learned? It wasn't that expensive. It wasn't that complicated. We just had to decide that workers' dignity mattered more than executive comfort. The crowd was on their feet now, the applause deafening. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start where you are. Document everything. Know your rights. Support each other. And when someone tells you that change is impossible, remember that 8 months ago, I was cleaning toilets for minimum wage. Now I'm a vice president with a board seat. Not because the system wanted to change, but because we forced it to. He stepped back from the podium, his message delivered, and the convention center erupted. People weren't just clapping, they were cheering, stamping their feet, whistling. Daniel stood there, overwhelmed, as 5,000 voices validated his journey, his struggle, his refusal to disappear. Backstage afterward, he was mobbed by people wanting to share their stories, ask advice, just touch someone who'd fought the system and won. Daniel listened to each one, made mental notes about organizations to connect with, workers to help, battles to fight. This was what Victoria had meant. This was the power of his story. Not just personal redemption, but a roadmap for others. 3 months after the conference, Daniel stood in the boardroom of Langford Industries as a full voting member. The agenda item was whether to extend the worker protection program to their overseas facilities, a move that would cost millions and face fierce resistance from shareholders. Gregory Marx was leading the opposition. The economic impact would be significant. Our international competitors don't have these restrictions. We'd be operating at a disadvantage. We'd be operating with integrity, Daniel countered. Workers in Bangladesh and Vietnam deserve the same protections as workers in Philadelphia. Their labor builds our profits. The least we can do is ensure they're treated with dignity. The debate went on for an hour. Daniel presented data, case studies, moral arguments. Some board members supported him. Others sided with Marx. It came down to a vote. 7 in favor, 7 against, 6 opposed. The motion passed. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not victory exactly, but progress. Real, measurable progress. After the meeting, Victoria caught up with him in the hallway. That was close. Too close. We barely won. But we won. And next time it'll be a little easier. The time after that, easier still. She smiled, looking healthier than she had in months. You're changing this company from the inside, Daniel. Exactly like I hoped you would. We're changing it, he corrected. I can't do this alone. You're not alone. You've never been alone. Victoria paused. I'm submitting my resignation as CEO next month, staying on as board chair, but stepping back from daily operations. Daniel's stomach dropped. Victoria, my heart can't take the stress anymore. The doctors are clear about that. And honestly, I don't want it to. I've spent 20 years building this empire. I want to spend the next 20 building something that matters more. She met his eyes. I'm recommending you as part of the executive transition team, not CEO. You're not ready for that yet, and frankly, neither is the company. But as a key voice in whoever takes over. People are going to fight that. Let them fight. You've proven you can handle it. The transition took 6 months. The new CEO, Patricia Reynolds, came from outside the company with a background in sustainable business and ethical corporate governance. Daniel clashed with her almost immediately over implementation speed, but they found common ground in their shared belief that companies had responsibilities beyond shareholder returns. On Daniel's 1-year anniversary in his role, Langford Industries was featured in the Wall Street Journal. How one company transformed its culture after a near-fatal crisis. The article detailed the reforms, the improved retention rates, the worker satisfaction scores that had climbed from industry worst to industry leading. It also profiled Daniel, though he'd tried to avoid the spotlight. The accompanying photo showed him in the employee cafeteria, eating lunch with maintenance workers, still refusing to separate himself from where he'd come from. Tommy texted him the minute the article dropped. You made it, brother. Sarah would be proud. That night, Daniel came home to find Lily waiting with a surprise. She'd made dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer, salad from a bag. The meal was simple, slightly burnt, absolutely perfect. What's this for? Daniel asked, pulling her into a hug. Mrs. Chen said you had a big day. I wanted to celebrate. Lily grinned. Plus, I'm practicing cooking because someday I'm going to be a chef. Is that what you want to be? Maybe. Or a doctor, or a teacher. I haven't decided yet. She shrugged with the easy confidence of someone who believed she could be anything. But I know I want to help people, like you do. Daniel's throat tightened. This was what he'd been fighting for. Not the title or the salary or even the reforms. This, his daughter believing the world was a place where hard work mattered, where helping others was valued, where ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. They ate dinner together at their small kitchen table, Lily chattering about school and friends and the book she was reading. Normal, safe, stable. Everything Daniel had fought to preserve. After she went to bed, Daniel stepped out onto the fire escape, looking out over Philadelphia like he had so many times before. But the view felt different now, not because the city had changed, but because he had. His phone rang. Victoria. "Did you see the article?" she asked. "Hard to miss." "They're calling you a pioneer, a revolutionary. How does that feel?" Daniel laughed. "Terrifying. I'm just a guy trying to do the right thing." "That's what revolutionaries always say." Victoria's voice was warm. "I have news. 3 more companies have reached out about implementing similar programs. They want you to consult. Build what you built here." "I'm not leaving Langford." "You don't have to. Do it on weekends, write a book, start a nonprofit. There are 1,000 ways to expand this impact." She paused. "Your story is bigger than one company now, Daniel. It's time to share it." Over the following year, Daniel did exactly that. He consulted with companies across the country, helping them build worker protection programs. He testified before Congress on labor reform. He wrote articles, gave speeches, appeared on news programs that had once vilified him. The work was exhausting. The criticism never fully stopped. Every step forward felt like fighting through concrete. But slowly, incrementally, things changed. Other companies adopted similar policies. Labor laws were updated. The conversation about worker rights shifted from fringe activism to mainstream concern. Not everywhere, not completely, but enough to matter. On a crisp November evening, 2 years after Daniel had saved Victoria's life, he stood on stage at the National Labor Relations Board annual conference. This time, the crowd was 10,000 strong, broadcast to millions more online. But Daniel wasn't nervous anymore. He told this story enough times that it felt like breathing, not easier, but familiar, natural. 2 years ago, he began, I was invisible. A night shift janitor barely surviving on minimum wage. Today I'm speaking to you as Vice President of Employee Relations at Langford Industries, board member, and advocate for workers' rights across the country. The crowd applauded, but Daniel raised a hand. But here's what I need you to understand. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to stay invisible when the system tried to erase me. And if I can do it, anyone can. He shared the data, the companies that had reformed, the workers who'd been protected, the lives that had changed. But more importantly, he shared the stories. The single mother who'd reported harassment and kept her job instead of being fired, the warehouse worker who'd recovered stolen wages and fed his family, the immigrant janitor who'd filed a safety complaint and lived to tell about it. This is what's possible when we refuse to accept that things can't change, Daniel said, when we fight for each other instead of just ourselves, when we remember that every worker, regardless of title or salary, deserves dignity. After the speech, as Daniel stood backstage fielding questions and handshakes, his phone rang. Lily, calling from home where she was doing homework under Mrs. Chen's watchful eye. "Daddy, I'm watching your speech on the computer. You're really good at this." "Thanks, sweetheart. Almost done here, then I'll be home." "Mrs. Chen wants to know if you want dumplings for dinner." "Dumplings sound perfect." "Okay. Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Lily Bean." He hung up and for a moment just stood there holding the phone, thinking about how far they'd come. 2 years ago, they'd been one crisis away from losing everything. Now they had stability, security, a future. The drive home took Daniel through neighborhoods he knew well, the ones he'd lived in when he was invisible. When he was just another worker, the system chewed up and spit out. He saw people standing at bus stops after long shifts, looking exhausted. Saw janitors cleaning office buildings through illuminated windows. Saw all the invisible workers who kept the city running. He saw himself 2 years ago. Back at the apartment, still the modest place in a decent neighborhood, because Daniel wasn't ready for anything fancier, Lily and Mrs. Chen had set the table. The dumplings were homemade, a recipe Mrs. Chen had taught Lily, the kitchen still warm from cooking. They ate together, the 3 of them, talking about everything and nothing. Lily's upcoming school play, Mrs. Chen's grandson's college acceptance, Daniel's next consulting project, normal conversation, normal life, normal in the best possible way. After dinner, after Lily was in bed, Daniel stood on the fire escape one last time, looking out over Philadelphia's nighttime sprawl. The city glittered below him, full of people fighting their own battles, trying to survive their own systems. Somewhere out there, someone was working too hard for too little. Someone was being mistreated by their employer. Someone was deciding whether to speak up or stay silent, whether to fight back or accept their fate. Daniel couldn't save them all, couldn't fix every injustice, but he'd built something, created tools and templates and policies that others could use, proven that change was possible, even when it seemed impossible. His phone buzzed with an email from Victoria, sent from her home where she was enjoying semi-retirement and much better health. It was a link to a news article, Langford Industries named top employer for worker rights and protections. Below it, she'd written, "We did it, you did it. Thank you for saving my life, both times." Daniel smiled and pocketed his phone. Inside, Lily was sleeping peacefully, dreaming dreams uncomplicated by fear of poverty or instability. She would grow up believing that workers deserved dignity, that systems could change, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, because her father had shown her it was true. The journey from night shift janitor to vice president, from victim to advocate, from invisible to unstoppable. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments Daniel wanted to give up, to accept that fighting was too hard and survival was enough. But he hadn't given up. And because of that, thousands of workers across the country had better protections, better wages, better lives. It wasn't perfect. The work would never be finished, but it was something. It mattered. Daniel Harper had saved Victoria Langford's life in a conference room 8 months ago, and in return, she'd helped him save thousands of others by refusing to let his story end in silence and shame. Now, standing on a fire escape in Philadelphia, looking out at a city full of invisible workers, Daniel understood something fundamental. He'd been given a second chance not just to survive, but to build something lasting, to transform his personal tragedy into systemic change, to prove that the arc of justice, while long, could be bent by ordinary people refusing to accept the unacceptable. He wasn't done. There were more companies to reform, more workers to protect, more battles to fight. Tomorrow he'd wake up and get back to work. But tonight, in this moment, he let himself feel it. Peace, purpose, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his daughter would grow up in a world slightly better than the one he'd inherited, that the man who'd once cleaned toilets for minimum wage now sat in boardrooms demanding change, that doing the right thing, while it had cost him everything, had ultimately given him even more. Daniel Harper had been invisible once. Now he was seen. And because of that, so were thousands of others who'd been waiting in the shadows, hoping someone would finally notice they were there. The story that had begun with CPR in a conference room had become something larger than anyone could have predicted. Not just a tale of personal redemption, but a blueprint for systemic transformation. Proof that ordinary people, given the chance and the courage, could reshape the world around them. And it all started with one simple decision: to help someone who needed it, regardless of the cost. That was a lesson worth remembering, a story worth sharing, a legacy worth building. Daniel took one last look at the Philadelphia skyline, then went inside to his daughter, to his life, to the future he'd fought so hard to create. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, finally, he could rest.